See the blinking light? Is the voice. Oh my god. Okay, so I recently joined a book club and we decided to read Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This book is super popular. I mean, Reese Witherspoon had it be one of her book club books, so I think that's pretty much everything you need to know about it. My book group hasn't finished reading the book yet, but I really wanted to talk to someone about it, so I thought we could talk about it. So I'm just going to go through and kind of highlight the parts that stood out to me. And obviously this has spoilers because it's going to be about the whole book. One thing that is cool that I didn't realize until the end is that this is Miss Owens' first book. I mean, her first novel. She's the co-author of 3 internationally best-selling nonfiction books about her life as a wildlife scientist in Africa. So all of the nature talk in this book, like, that came from somewhere real. So that was cool. The fact that this is her first novel, I mean, she killed it. She knocked it out of the park, so great job. And also just look at her. I mean, I would trust her with my life. So the book starts off very ominously, I think very well. The prologue, it's just like one page. The last sentence is, "But this morning 2 boys from the village rode their bikes out to the fire tower and from the 3rd switchback spotted his denim jacket." His being Chase Andrews. Chase Andrews being a man lying face down in the swamp. One thing that the other people in my book club did mention is that they had trouble picturing the marsh, and we're out here on the West Coast, we don't really know what a marsh is. The first sentence of the book is, "Marsh is not swamp," but I couldn't help for like the first half of the book to just be picturing a swamp instead of a marsh, and then I finally looked up a marsh and I realized, oh, I actually have seen one of those before, and it was better after that. Okay, so like the first like good 1/8 of the book, I want to say, is pretty sad. Like Kaya is abandoned by all of her family members, her mother who just up and leaves, and then Jody, her brother, leaves, and she's left alone with her alcoholic father, which is pretty concerning. He's had a history of violence. He's beat up their mom, and she has to put a lot on her back as a young girl, 6 years old, I think she is when all this goes down. She suffers like some pretty serious neglect to the point where I was pretty surprised later on in the book when her character was able to have such a successful academic career. Don't know how realistic that is, but it's a good story. Okay, so I really liked when Kaya started figuring things out for herself and started trying to cook meals for herself, even though they were really shitty sometimes, like ground up saltines. Gross. How she takes herself out on the boat is really cool. I like her little self-dialogue. "Gotta check the gas like Jody said so Pa won't figure I took it." She poked a broken reed into the rusted tank. Enough for a short ride, I reckon. That was cute. I had a hard time figuring out if Kaya's family was black or white. I guess it is kind of obvious. She's described as having long, straight black hair. They didn't fit in with the rest of the town. They were called white trash, so I guess it is pretty clear. But for whatever reason, I had a hard time picturing that. Like, I imagined her as, at the very least, being very tanned or mixed. So I really liked this quote that Scupper, who is Tate's dad, said to him. His dad had told him many times that the definition of a real man is one who cries without shame, reads poetry with his heart, feels opera in his soul, and does what's necessary to defend a woman. Just so iconic. And that poem that Tate found by Thomas More that we kind of revisit throughout the novel. She's gone to the lake of the dismal swamp, where all night long by a firefly lamp she paddles her white canoe. I love that imagery. That one's a really good one. It was really cute and sweet when Kaya's dad took her out fishing and kind of started showing up more. It was obviously sad when it only lasted for a short amount of time, but you know how the book is just suspenseful for the whole time you're reading it. I mean, it starts with them finding a body and the investigation is going on, so that's building suspense. The other side of the story where Kaya's left alone, things are getting worse and worse, that's building suspense too. I didn't know how dark this book would get. I was nervous that she's obviously being abused and neglected, was worried that we were going to cross into the realm of sexual abuse by a family member. And I'm so relieved that that didn't happen, to the point that when they were sitting on the fishing boat together, and it seemed like he contorted his body in odd postures to avoid brushing against her. It was like, big relief. That's good news. So, you know, Kaya's life goes on. She continues growing up by herself, teaching herself things, not going to school, and the investigation's going on. I didn't really have too much to comment there. I mean, it was good. One thing about this book is they don't really mention mosquitoes too much. Like, maybe they've mentioned it once. The muggy afternoon rallied mosquitoes. But, like, you know, you're by a body of water in the South. Aren't you just getting bit all the time? I don't know how they dealt with that. Kind of paints a rosy picture of the marsh, but I'm wondering how realistic that is. When Tate abandons her, we get the Tate, no, no. Then drop to her knees, her face against the mud. She felt a strong pull out from under her, a tide she knew well. When I first read this, I was too dumb to get the metaphor, and I thought she was like getting sucked away in a riptide, or she like saw Tate being sucked away by what she said, but that was just really her cry of abandonment. And then we see that cry reflected later in the book, which we'll get to. Oh yeah, her whole date with Chase was just, you know that he's not a great guy by what the officers have been saying about him while they're conducting the investigation. And that was kind of something I was a little disappointed by, because we knew that Kaya and Chase were gonna get together, because either Joe or Ed said, oh, you know, we've heard the rumors, like he's been with a bunch of women, including that stinky old marsh girl. And I kind of would have liked it to be more of a surprise. Like, you kind of feel like he's a bad guy, but then he doesn't force her to have sex with him. Wow, what a great standard. He is sweet to her, and they develop a pretty serious relationship. He even says he's falling in love with her at one point, and I kind of wish that we didn't know that that would happen, but I think we did by the time we read about it. But yeah, when Kaya's thinking about the date that just happened where Chase tried to have sex with her and she said no. By the way, good for her, like somebody who's grown up in her situation. It's hard to say no if you feel like you're pressured, or, you know, Chase is like this huge football player, so that was probably scary for her, and I'm glad that she felt like she could say no and get away. That was great. That was empowering. She says, as long as she ranted, sobs couldn't surface, but nothing could stop the burning shame and sharp sadness. A simple hope of being with someone, of actually being wanted, of being touched, had drawn her in. But these hurried, groping hands were only a taking, not a sharing or giving. That's like, I felt that. When Chase sees her house for the first time, he's like checking out her butterfly and other paraphernalia collection, which would probably be really cool to look at. He thought, why keep stuff you can see right outside your door? Yeah, like, okay, Chase, like, can you see a great blue heron tail feather, or like a, you know, red jayhawk's, you know, forehead feather? I don't think so. Just go outside and find it if you think you can see it, but I don't think it's right outside the door. That's why she needs to hold on to these things. Oh yeah, I liked this. They're looking for her. They're trying to get her so they can question her about the death of Chase Andrews. And Joe's like, oh, she's already gone. And Ed says, yep, herd is coming. She can probably hear a rabbit sleeping. That's a cool power. It sucked when Tate looked at her and left. Like, I got it for sure. Like, anyone could tell you, if you're a senior and your girlfriend's the age of a sophomore or a freshman, it's not gonna work out if you go to college. Like, that's just gonna be weird. But it was still really sad, and I wish that he had the balls to tell her. When Chase and Kaya go to the motel to consummate what Kaya thinks is their impending marriage, they go to this cheap motel. She stepped into a room that seemed clean enough but reeked of Pine Sol and was furnished in America cheap. Fake panel walls, sagging bed with a nickel vibrator machine, and a black and white TV, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so nickel vibrator machine. I had to look this up. Apparently it's... Okay, so actually what I thought it was at first was wrong. It's really a machine that vibrates your bed. In the 50s, they had entire beds that vibrated, but a man named John Huftling invented a machine that could be attached to any bed to vibrate it. Motel owners bought them and made money from people putting change in them. The bed would vibrate for like 15 minutes. This eventually fell out of style, and also it was easy to steal change from the boxes. This was supposed to enhance your sleep and give a massage to your entire body. So just to give a little bit more historical context, I found some memories that people shared online of their experiences. xflowers says on blog.retroplanet.com, "Yes, I remember my 2 older sisters and I were traveling across California in 1969, and one motel that we stopped at had these. We turned it on thinking it would help us to fall asleep, but we were so tired we just started laughing." JCMCD on retrothing.com said, "Well, I recall my honeymoon night. I saved a quarter, and just as my husband sat down on the bed, it started to vibrate, not mildly, but quite wildly. And it was close to the wall, and the headboard started banging against the wall, and he shot up off the bed and turned looking at me. He had never seen a vibrating bed. And of course I was laughing so hard. It malfunctioned, and we had to move the bed and unplug it to get it to stop." PCV Colin, also from retrothing.com, said, "Once when I was a very young kid, our family went on a trip somewhere. At some point we stopped in the middle of the desert, maybe somewhere in the vicinity of the California-Nevada border, to spend the night. It was a typical roach hotel, the only thing in sight for as far as the eye could see across a flat desert. Our room was filthy and the TV was torn out of the wall, gone, with some cables left dangling for us to contemplate. I remember sitting on one of the beds and noticing the magic fingers thing and begging Dad to give me a quarter. Finally, he relented. I popped in the quarter and the whole bed vibrated like mad. I was almost thrown from the bed. Whenever I tried to talk while attempting to remain seated on a bed that had suddenly become a bedtime bronco, nice, it sounded like someone was whacking me in the back repetitively with both their hands. We couldn't stop laughing until the timer ran out on the magic fingers. A cockroach, then 2, crawled across the wall. I believe they were laughing too." Such a wholesome tale. We had a total girl boss moment when Kaya bought her land back. The guy was like, "Looks like it'll be about $800 total. Put the land free and clear." And Kaya just like walks out with a full deed. Just that book money, man. She made it. I was so excited when there was a courthouse cat. Sunday Justice is like probably the best character in the book. He lays on her lap. I'll just read it. Afraid to move, she sat stiff until her leg cramped, then shifted slightly to stretch her muscles. Like, who hasn't sat forever while a cat or some other pet's been on them? Okay, so there is a rape scene or an attempted that in this book. I just glanced over it. It's just kind of hard to read. And I was thinking there, like, the whole tone of the book is pretty ominous, and a lot of these books that deal with topics like abuse and neglect growing up end up sad. We had no idea that the Marsh girl would have a happy ending. When she ran into Chase and he tried to take advantage of her, I thought it could go one of 2 ways. It could break her, or it could empower her to put an end to him. I was really, really worried that this book wouldn't have a happy ending, and when I read this part, I thought, yikes. I thought I would be sad after finishing the book, and I'm so glad that that wasn't the case. I thought Kaya's lawyer, Tom, he like really nailed in the idea that the prosecution didn't have any concrete evidence, no positive evidence, just kind of circumstantial evidence, and evidence that somebody had committed a crime by wiping away or tampering with evidence. Tom comes in tough with the logic. I love how he gets the sheriff when he's cross-examining him. They're talking about how the footprints have disappeared and what that means. The prosecutor kind of made it sound like, oh, only Kaya could have known how to obscure footprints in that way. And Tom postulates that it's possible that due to the tides, the footprints could have been erased by the water. The sheriff answered, "Well, I've never seen it wipe out anything so complete as that, so I don't know." "But Sheriff, as you said, you're the expert, trained in footprint examination, and now you say you don't know if this common occurrence happened that night or not?" "Well, it wouldn't be that hard to prove one way or the other, would it? Just go out there at low tide, make some tracks, and see if they're wiped out when the tide comes in." "Yes, it wouldn't be that hard to determine one way or the other. So why wasn't it done? Here we are in court, and you have no proof whatsoever that a person wiped away footprints to cover a crime." He got him. He got him. Kaya wins the trial. Unfortunately, whatever bond she had left with the villagers, I mean, probably nothing, but like it's completely severed now. She feels even more alienated and alone than before. But luckily, she has Tate. They reconcile, they love each other. You know, Tate's sorry he left her. They probably worked on that a little bit more throughout the years. Chapter 57. As they walked along the tide line in late afternoon, he took her hand and looked at her. "Will you marry me, Kaya?" "We are married, like the geese," she said. "Okay, I can live with that." Like, when I mentioned near the start of the book, when Kaya screams, "Tate, Tate, no, no," when she realizes Tate's not coming back. Well, you know, karma comes around when Tate finds Kaya dead in the boat, you know, at 64 years of age. They've had a long and happy life together. He screams, "Kaya, Kaya, no, no." The whole revelation about Amanda Hamilton, the poet whose work we hear referenced mostly through Kaya reciting, that was Kaya all along, was like, okay, cool. I think it was supposed to be a little more earth-shattering, but for me it was just like, you know, the book had ended, I feel like, in a really good place. It was a happy ending. Kaya didn't die alone. She was a successful published author. They, you know, had so many fun times together. That was great. That was like ice cream with like whipped cream and a cherry on top. Like, it felt great. And then the Amanda Hamilton thing felt like a little bit, you know, extra. It was cool. I don't know. I wonder what you would think of it. Like, was that a revelation for you? Or I definitely didn't see it coming, but I also didn't find it necessary. Maybe if that kind of played into, like, maybe if she was even less sure about writing a book and that kind of played into it somehow, like, Kaya really didn't want to write those books. How did she ever get the courage to, you know, maybe she really doubted herself or thought no one would take her seriously, but she'd been writing poems all along, so no wonder she was fine with it, and everyone was so surprised that she could do it, but of course she could have done it. She was Amanda Hamilton. Maybe that would have been a little more significant, but it was nice. It was fine. And yeah, the book ends with Tate finding out that she really did murder Chase, which I think we all knew. I don't know, what did you guys think? Did you guys know throughout the whole book that it was Kaya? They kind of set it up pretty quickly, like, oh, there's this dead guy in the marsh. I wonder who killed her. Oh, maybe it was that creepy marsh girl. I think maybe I wish that it was a little less obvious that she had done it. But I also don't know how that would have been written. Like, maybe if the author had mixed in or emphasized some other side story of like a guy whose wife he'd slept with or something like that, that might have been interesting. Then it would have been more of a murder mystery and less of a coming of age novel, which I think it really shines as. So, you know, you can't have it all. Okay, but like, also, how did that not come up? Like, how did she never tell him that? I feel like he would have known. Because she was never like, I didn't do it, guys. Like, it definitely wasn't me. She just like didn't say anything about it. So maybe he always knew, and this is just finding evidence was significant, which is fair. I wonder why she kept Chase's shell, because that was such a dark part of her life when all of that fell to pieces. And oh my god, the whole thing about finding out that he was engaged to Always Wears Pearls through the newspaper article, like, how shitty is that? It was funny that her name was actually Pearl, like how narcissist, or I don't know, it was just, that's funny. Yeah, and Patty Love sucks, just Chase's mom, just so awful. That whole thing was so, it made me so mad. It was well written. I got mad reading that. I liked in the book how it was mentioned a couple times the importance of woman friendship. I agree with that. I think that's really important, and it was really sad that Kaya didn't get that. It was nice that Mabel was there for her though when she needed it. Mabel and Jumpin were two of my favorite characters. Not only did they take pity on her and help her out when she needed it, but they actually actually literally did the thing where give a man a fish, he'll eat for the day, teach him how to fish, he'll never be hungry. They created an avenue for her to provide for herself, and that's really empowering. That's a great way to lift up somebody who's impoverished. Final thoughts about the book. I really liked it. I read it in 2 nights. It was really suspenseful. I think I would enjoy it more on a second read because I wouldn't be worried the whole time about what's gonna happen. I really thought it was gonna end poorly for poor Kaya. It was just gonna be another one of those sad books where the woman's just ruined and maybe she turns into a witch or something. I was really relieved and really happy that Miss Owens gave her some redemption and a happy ending. The reunification with Jody and being close with his wife and her kids. Even though she couldn't have her own kids, she was able to be part of that family. And of course her relationship with Tate, and that just seemed so good for her, and still was able to keep her house and made money from doing the things she loved. But it is a really ominous book, and I think the author did a really good job with it. Oh yeah, a rating. I really like the interwoven narrative aspect. Characters, I think, were great. Setting was great too. I think if I'd experienced the South more, I would be able to picture it better, but I loved all of the animal descriptions and all of the vegetable and food descriptions. The towns were cool. The plot was great. We love a good murder. The story arcs within the plot, I liked all of them a lot. Got a lot of action. The boat chases was cool. It was an uplifting book that takes life seriously enough. It wasn't frivolous, and I would recommend it. It wasn't my favorite, so I'm probably going to give it an 8 out of 10, but that's still really good. And I think Miss Owens did a great job. If she wrote another book, I would definitely read it. Glad I got that out of my system, and please leave your thoughts. I would love to know what you thought of the book. Would you recommend this book? Did you know that Kaya was the one who murdered Chase the whole time? Did you think that the book was going to have a happy or a sad ending? Let me know. This has been Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens.
Done?
Yeah, I'm done.